The Dershow.
We know that Kamala Harris will get the vice presidential nominee, notwithstanding her low approval ratings. Biden is already pushing her to the forefront. She's playing a stronger role. She's actually doing slightly better on television, and her husband is coming out now, interviewed by Wolf Blitzer. And so she's going to be the vice presidential nominee, and therefore, who Trump appoints as his vice presidential running mate will be more important in this election than in any recent previous election. Maybe Sarah Palin may have cost the election for the Republicans. That was such a bad nomination. But McCain, was a good candidate, but he didn't pick a good vice president. And, you go back in time. My first election was John F. Kennedy. We couldn't vote at 18 in those days. You had to be 21. And so he was the first person I voted for. And I hated Lyndon Johnson back in the day. I thought of him as a kind of gruff. I didn't like him. But I was very happy when he was selected to be the vice presidential nominee because I knew it was a completely tactical decision. Bobby Kennedy made the decision, basically. He was running his brother's campaign. Bobby Kennedy hated Lyndon Johnson with a passion, but realized that to win a very close election, of course, the election turned out to be razor thin. People still contest it. But to win the election, he had to win the South. And appointing the South's senator, Lyndon Johnson, would be a big help in trying to win a number of those states. And it worked. Ironically, the issue of whether or not the vice president will ultimately become the president was not an issue because John Kennedy was healthy and young and vigorous. Who would know that within a short period of time he had been murdered and assassinated, and the man he selected, who he hated, to be his vice president would become the president. And he actually was not as bad a president as I had feared. He did some good work for civil rights and got us into the Vietnam War, like everybody else. A mixed record. But nobody dreamed that when Lyndon Johnson was named vice president and then elected that he'd become the president, because he was probably too old. If President Kennedy had served his full 8 years, Johnson, in those days, today he'd be a youngster compared to the people who are running. But I think people thought he would be too old and therefore he would not be running. But now whoever is given the vice presidential nomination may very well be our next president, either because of age and illness and death, or remember, both of these people will be lame ducks the minute they get into office. Neither can run for a third term. Donald Trump may think he can, but he can't. And so the vice president is going to be the most likely leading candidate to run on his or her party's ticket 4 years from now. So the decision is really, really an important one. A lot of names have been thrown out. Tim Scott, very personable, very likable, very smart, accommodating. He said nice things about Donald Trump. African American, comes from a state that Trump will probably win, but he nonetheless he could help. He can help with the African American vote. He can help with some southern state votes as well. So Tim Scott's a potential candidate. Another South Carolinian that's been mentioned is Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace is extraordinarily attractive candidate. The first woman to graduate the Citadel. You remember the Citadel case when it became gender integrated, and she wrote a book about it. And she has a good military record. She's strong and not a lot of negatives. The other one is a kind of flash in the pan, Elise Stefanik, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, nobody ever heard of her. She was a Republican candidate, congresswoman from New York, which is a rarity. And she made her name by going after the three presidents of the Ivy League colleges and doing a great job. And it really brought her to not only national, but international attention. And so her name is always on every potential list. Another name that's on the lists is Congresswoman from Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene. She would, I think, sink Donald Trump. She would be the Sarah Palin. This is a woman who's talked about space lasers and, the Rothschilds. And, she's made some incredibly foolish statements. And she's an extreme right winger. And I do not think she would help the ticket. But, who knows who Trump would want to pick. And then there are the outside possibilities. The one I would be very favorable to is Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, who is, I think, one of the most brilliant and experienced men in government. He was the head of the CIA. He was the Secretary of State. He was also my student, which is not a plus in national elections, but a plus for me. And then there's Tucker Carlson, who would also lose Trump the election. He would guarantee Trump just more support from his base, but would narrow the base and not extend it at all. The same thing is true with Vivic Ramaswamy. He's a strange dude, and I think that he would hurt the ticket.